good morning rather, my little TikTokers and Instagrammers and other pages if I do put it on as a short. This is just a short, specific. I'm at the Church of St Mary Magdalene's, East Ham. Once in the countryside, many years ago now, in the heart of what they call urban London and whatnot. But what main thing is about this video is this grave in the middle here. In loving memory of Lily, dearly loved daughter of R.J. and P.S. Rogers, who passed away December the 9th, 1911, aged 23 years. And then there's a verse. She's obviously important, but the main ones on this are also Edward James William, son of the above, aged 31 years. Also Edward Henry Bagley, nephew of the above, aged 33 years, who lost their lives in the Titanic disaster, April the 15th, 1912. Out of the depths I call to thee, O Lord, to thee. Before thy throne of grace I fall, be merciful to me. And then it's got also in loving memory of Robert Edward Rogers, who died November the 12th, 1879, aged 6 weeks. And then also Mary Rogers, who died June the 11th, 1887, aged 5 years. Suffer little children, oh come unto me. So that's that one. That's the Titanic grave, which is obviously very interesting. Then you've got the church, which is another massive interesting point. I've done the tour of the inside of this one and outside as well, which is about 35 minutes. So if you wish to see that, there'll be pictures. But if you want to watch the full tour, hit my London Luke YouTube or Facebook page. Because this professes to be Newham's oldest church. Kind of like St Bartholomew's the Great and All Hallows by the Tower. This church has a slight smidge of rivalry with two other churches in what is now Newham. With one of them is All Saints West Ham, which is between Plaistow and Stratford, and the other ones is St Mary the Little Virgin at Little Ilford. And they all kind of have a smidge of rivalry with each other about which is the oldest. But from what I've gathered and what I've seen and read, this is the older one. It dates to the 12th century, Norman, and it does have an apse for where the altar. All that means is that it is round. The way the altar is, it's curved rather than just being straight, and that is usually a sign of pre-medieval churches, so like Norman era or before. And this church, dating from the 1100s, falls smack bang into our Norman era. But yeah, we're going to go and have a look at interesting grave number 2, which is over here by the wall, and thanks to the vicar for telling me about this one. George Story. This grave shows that through George's parents, George's father was an officer, and this grave shows that officers did take their wives, even pregnant ones, abroad with them. And so this is George Story of this parish, born 21st of August 1804 at sea on board HMS Temeraire. Died on the 10th of May 1874. Then you've got a long verse, which is obviously religious verse and stuff. And then also of Mary Ann Thompson. I think that is sister of the above, but it's very worn away. But yeah, that's another interesting little one, which is a man born at sea in 1804. So you're more or less near on Trafalgar era and everything. It's the Napoleonic War era of the Napoleonic Wars. So yeah. This is the war memorial for the First and the Second World Wars. So we'll get this filmed because it's starting to snow again, and then we'll be off ski. I've had a nice cup of tea over in the church centre. Lovely people here, very nice, and it has really paid me off because I was given permission to film a church service as long as I put the phone either discreetly in my bag or in my pocket and cover it when a child goes by. That was fine. Put the phone in my pocket and the damn thing overheated, so We haven't got the church service, but we've got the church, so that was the main thing. Mustn't grumble and mustn't be ungrateful for what we've got, I suppose, but it is annoying because I got permission and he said, the vicar said to me, oh yes, he went, I don't mind it, like they asked the other people and they didn't mind. He went, you can, because I told him about my page and everything. He went, under one condition, he went, that you put it on Christmas Day, the service, for those who might like to go to church but can't. So yeah, there we are. So you got George Story, born at sea, and then you got the two cousins who unfortunately died at sea. And over here is a bigger memorial, a more modern era, and people who are cremated of this parish nowadays, because burials, unless it's a very, very old family grave that might have space, burials are a no-no here. Some woman was buried in my youth in this churchyard and it took her a hell of a job to get it done. Remember in prayer before God those whose ashes are interred here. So yeah, hope you all found that little snippet interesting, guys and girls. There'll be pictures of this church inside and out, so it's been well covered. So if you want to see that, head over to my other page, or I may render it down into 10-minute increments. I'll see how I feel, as I've got a hell of a lot on the phone. Right, so hope you all found that interesting, and that's the Church of St Mary Magdalene at East Ham. So take care all, thanks for watching. A little bit of research on the internet's thrown up quite a bit of information on the cousins, both called Edward. This is Edward Rogers, and his other cousin is Edward Bagley. But this, as you can see, is an image of the first Edward mentioned on the grave. It's slightly unclear and a bit grainy, but we're lucky to have this and to be able to see it. Edward James William Rogers was born in Woolwich, which was in Kent in those days, England, on the 9th of September 1880. He was the son of James Rogers, 1852 to 1935, and Priscilla Susanna Bagley, 1854 to 1928. His father was from Portsmouth, Hampshire, and his mother was from Birmingham, Warwickshire, and they had married in London in 1876. Edward had a total of 9 siblings, of which are known: Alice, born in 1877, Harriet, born in 1844, Nellie, born in 1886, Robert, born in 1887, Lily, born 1888, Arthur, born in 1894, and Walter, born in 1895. On the 1881 census, the family are living at number 3 Elizabeth Terrace, Robert Street, East Ham, Essex, which was in Essex in those days, and his father is described as a bricklayer. They are living at 18 Robert Street, East Ham, on both the 1891 and 1901 censuses, but Robert's absence from the latter, perhaps already at sea. Edward was married in Bootle, Lancashire on June the 30th, 1901 to Elizabeth Matthews. She was born in 1878 in Newlyn, Cornwall. Their 3 children were all born in Lancashire. Edward James, born May the 2nd, 1902, Arthur Vernon, born May the 28th, 1906, and Norman Robert, born March the 28th, 1910. On the 1911 census, Robert and his family are living at 20 Leicester Road in Bootle, and Edward is by now described as an insurance agent. When he signed on to the Titanic on the 10th of April 1912, he gave his address as 120 Oxford Avenue, Southampton, and his previous ship as the Olympic. As a storekeeper, he could expect to earn monthly wages of £3.15. His cousin Edward Henry Bagley, son of his maternal uncle Edward Bagley, was a saloon steward on the Titanic. Edward, like his cousin, died in the disaster, of course. This Edward, his body was recovered by the Mackay Bennett and was buried at Fairview Lawn Cemetery, Halifax, Nova Scotia, on the 8th of May 1912. And this is the gravestone we're looking at for Edward, whose photo we've just looked at. And this is the report of when his body was discovered. Number 282, male, estimated age 32, dark. Clothing, uniform, jacket and trousers, green shirt and black coat, bandage on left leg. Tattoo, right arm, a butterfly. Effects, discharge, a book, a ring with a red stone, 15 cents and a tobacco pouch. Probably a storekeeper, which was right. Name, Edward J.W. Rogers. His wife later benefited from the Titanic Relief Fund, but what became of her is uncertain. His son Norman died in 1984 in Brighton. What became of his other two sons is also uncertain. Edward Rogers and his cousin Edward Bagley are remembered on the family headstone in St Mary's Magdalene Churchyard in East Ham, which is what we've already seen. Here we see the other Edward, his cousin, Edward Bagley here. He's shown with his grandmother and his only child, Edward. In those days they dressed boys and girls the same in dresses when they were infants, but this is a lovely image because look at Edward's face. He looks... It's unusual to see such a open, smiling face on a photo in those days, so it says quite a bit about him, poor man. Edward Henry Bagley was born in West Ham, Essex, so he's from my neck of the woods, England, on the 4th of March 1879, because don't forget West Ham was Essex in those days, and Woolwich was Kent. He was the only son, or the only child, of Edward Bagley, 1856 to 1898, and Lucy Ann Longhurst, 1861 to 1884. His father, a general labourer, was from Birmingham, and his mother from Monmouthshire, Wales, and they were married in 1878 in Woolwich, London. On the 1881 census, Edward and his parents were shown living at 25 Albert Road, Woolwich. Edward's mother died in 1884, aged just 23, and on the 1891 census he is still a schoolboy, and his father and him were shown living with his paternal grandmother, Mary Bagley, at 75 Elizabeth Street. His father passed away in 1898 at the age of 42, so he lost both his parents when they were fairly young. Edward does not appear on the 1901 census, perhaps already having commenced a career at sea. He was married in St Bartholomew's Church in West Ham on the 22nd of August 1909 to Edith Lily Inwood, born in 1885 in Silvertown, in Essex in those days, London now, and their only son, Edward Henry, who is also, you see in the picture there, was born on the 17th of September 1910. On the 1911 census, Edward is absent, but his wife and son were shown living at 105 Oxford Avenue, Southampton. When he signed on to the Titanic on the 4th of April 1912, Bagley gave his address as 11 Woodside Road in Southampton. His previous ship had been the Oceanic, and as a first-class steward he received monthly wages of £3.15. Also serving alongside him was his cousin Edward James William Rogers, son of his paternal aunt Priscilla Susanna Bagley. Edward Bagley died in the sinking, and his body, if recovered, was never identified, which is why, unlike his cousin, he doesn't have a grave or gravestone in the cemetery in Nova Scotia. Edward's widow, Edith, was never remarried and went to work as a nanny for P&O, spending much time away from home. She died aged 80 in Havering, London in 1966. His son Edward was married in Romford in 1939 to Winnie Irene Burgess, 1915 to 2005, and they had one son, David. He died in Havering in 1999. Edward Bagley and his cousin Edward Rogers are remembered on the family headstone in St Mary Magdalene Church, East Ham. And that, ladies and gents, are the two cousins, the two Edwards that both lost their lives in the Titanic disaster. A little bit of interesting local history of ours that not everyone knows about that grave. So I hope you all found this interesting. If you did, please give it a like and a share. Thanks very much for watching.